Hello. Here at Wayward Wine, we're going to do a little feature on what I think is one of the most interesting winemakers to come out of California in a long time, and that is Kenneth Volk. Kind of a pioneer of beautiful, elegant, poised wines that are well structured, and honestly remind me more of Europe than they do of California. And that's thanks in part today to John Coakley and my mother-in-law, Terry Hensley, who managed to find some pretty wild single variety, single vineyard wines that he makes that are almost impossible to find these days from older vintages, from grapes like Graciano and Aglianico. So stay tuned. We're going to taste through those in a bit here, and I'm going to give you a profile of what he's up to and how well the wines age as well. They're dating back to 2012, 13, and 14. So it's a proof to the matter that he can make pretty solid, well-structured, well-ageable wine today, and even a warm place like California. Now, Kenneth Volk got his start in winemaking back in the 70s, but really only made his first production wine in 1983. But since then has gone on to create Kenneth Volk Vineyards as a brand, working just from his small single vineyard that he has, his own little estate vineyard, in addition to sourcing some extremely cool and extremely experimental vineyards throughout Central California. Now, Kenneth today is based in Santa Maria Valley, just in the Santa Barbara County, and really is known for Pinot Noir and Chardonnay, thanks to those Santa Maria Valley winds that bring in the coastal air, that bring in the fog, that help to cool things down and to make really bright, really well-structured Pinot Noir and Chardonnay. He's a big proponent of open-top fermenters and natural fermentations, hand harvesting, leaving stems on as well. And that provides his wines a definitely unique character that's very reflective of where they're being grown, but also where they're being fermented, because all those natural native yeasts in the winery and throughout help to really kind of pinpoint certain flavor characteristics and structures. So as you'll see in the tastings, they get pretty wild and woolly, but they're very, very cool and complex, to say the least. So hope you enjoy. Okay, let's try Ken Volk's stab at Aglianico from Pomar Junction Vineyard in Paso Robles. Now, in the glass, we have a fairly medium plus intensity ruby with fairly pretty garnet highlights, but for something that's already pushing on, getting on 8 years old, it's still got a lot of vibrancy of color to it. You'll find that with Aglianico. It ages really well. Aromatically, so medium plus intensity, I'm definitely getting like baking spices here, mocha powder. There's also some really pretty licorice, black licorice. And just definitely like blackberry syrup, maybe blueberry jam, some sort of dark fruited quality there. Syrupy, but not raisinated per se. I'm not getting a lot of raisin notes or anything like that. On the palate, it is bone dry with medium plus acidity. There's quite a lot of twang there. A slight bit of VA, and I think that's intentional because of the methods that he uses. It's got a lot of zip. The tannins are high for sure. These are dusty, grippy, leathery tannins that demand food, or at least a strong constitution. But it's pretty powerful stuff. The alcohol's, though, pretty tame. It's only maybe around 14, as far as I can tell. It's warm, but not hot. And the body's not huge either. I mean, this is medium plus bodied, but all that acidity really helps to clean it out, and so it doesn't become too ponderous or heavy. This is a fairly vibrant, complex wine. It's very dark and brooding on one hand, but still very bright and mouth-watering on the other. So it's kind of got this great juxtaposition going. It's kind of dancing a very fine tightrope. And flavors certainly match what the nose has. You get a little bit more earth and dust. The mocha powder's there, but it gets a bit more serious. It definitely has a bit more tobacco and smoke going on. A little bit of ash in there. There's a beautiful dustiness to it overall on the palate. And I noticed more dried fruit characteristics as opposed to the nose, which was more fresh syrups and that sort of thing. It definitely tends to be more raisinated on the palate. You get more kind of dried cranberry, dried blueberries, if you've ever had those before. The licorice is still there. A lot of those spice notes are still present, and the length is definitely medium plus. This is, very good quality wine, and a grape that should be considered for hot climates, places like Paso Robles, places like Eastern Washington, where it's dry and arid. The grape can handle it. It's from southern Italy, and it knows what to do. It still can keep its acidity and tannin all the way through, and honestly is quite ageable. I'm not kidding. It's 2013, and it's still holding up impeccably well, with oodles of grip, lots of beautiful acidity, and a lot of bright fruit, actually. That shall probably hang around a few more years. It's probably hit peak, and I can only see it kind of starting to slowly fall apart in the next 5 to 6 years, but honestly, it'd still be drinkable even then. So if you can find a bottle or any of his Aglianico from Volk, do. It's pretty outstanding stuff and very reminiscent of Italy, as some of my co-conspirators can attest to. So thank you very much for watching, and take care. All right, let's try Ken Volk's take on another rare grape type, at least rare to the United States, and that's Touriga Nacional. So Touriga Nacional is one of the mainstays in Portugal, though, one of the main grapes that goes into port, as well as into many other red blends that are made there that are quite good value, typically. This 2013 Touriga Nacional comes from Pomar Junction Vineyard, that cool experimental vineyard in Paso Robles that also has the Aglianico that we try from Ken Volk. And this 2013 is certainly got a bit of age on it now, going on 7 years, but I think it's holding up quite well as a still dry wine. But let's try it. So in the glass, as you can see, hopefully, although the light's a little less on there, it's still quite bright and ruby in colored, medium intensity ruby. It's not showing any real signs of aging yet, none of that bricking going on or anything like that. So the color retention is quite nice, but definitely not as deep and dark as the Aglianico, which one would expect from this grape type from Touriga Nacional. Now the nose is pouncing. It is pronounced. This is pretty evocative, sexy stuff. There's lots of clove here, lots of lavender. You get dried violets, really pretty floral tones, lots of nice dried floral tones. That's also why it's a beautiful component in port as well. It provides a lot of those lovely floral notes. But I also get a kind of cool, super rich, super sweet balsamic note, as well as tart currants, tart red currant, black currant, for sure. Definitely like a black currant note, as well as plum, a beautiful purpley plum. It's pretty complex, pretty pronounced nose. It definitely is really interwoven and very, very, very just overall complex. The palate's dry. The acidity is medium plus. Really refreshing, really clean, really beautiful brightness there. That twangy currant notes kind of coming through in the acid. Also get a bit of clove there too, actually. And tannins, compared to the Aglianico, are kind of non-existent almost. They're very satiny, very smooth, and very soft. I'd say almost medium minus tannin structure here. Alcohol is also fairly moderate. It's 13.6, so medium alcohol. And overall, the body is about medium as well. This is just an even-keeled wine, definitely something more akin to medium-bodied Merlots, Pinot Noirs, anything fairly thin-skinned. It's quite pleasant. Flavor profile. The sort of floral, herbaceous thing, the lavender is kind of there, but honestly, it's more about fruit. The fresh red and black currant note is there, tart and twangy, as well as a bit of plum. It's quite poised, this thing. It definitely then slowly becomes more, in terms of flavor profile, more woody, a little bit more earthy, a little bit more herbaceous on the finish, which lasts a medium plus length. It's kind of here and gone to some extent, but it still kind of hangs around very delicately, in a good way, really. It's very ephemeral, almost, and almost kind of balletic. It's very on its tiptoes for sure here, yet while remaining a bit kind of interesting and, I don't know, slightly brooding as well. It's a funny thing. It's kind of a black swan, this. But really delicious, really refreshing. Definitely something you could put against any fish fare. Salmon would be beautiful with it. Pork would be really great with this as well. I wouldn't go anything too heavy sauced or too heavy spiced. Tomato-based dishes would be quite well as well because it's got that nice freshness and that acidity there. So anything with a bright tomato sauce would be pretty pleasant, but nothing overly baked, nothing overly peppered, nothing too dark, just nice, clean, lean meats or youngish cheeses. You could go slightly aged cheese as well, but I'd say a nice younger hard cheese would be pretty pleasant here. Overall, so yeah, really cool example of Touriga Nacional on its own without any blending or meddling going on, which is typical of a lot of the Portuguese blends. This is just a great example of what Paso can do with a rare grape type that is typically grown in a hot place. It really just takes well to the heat and the sun out there, as well as it does in Portugal. So yeah, if you can snag a bottle, grab it, of Ken Volk's Touriga Nacional. Probably any vintage would be pretty interesting and pretty complex. But thank you for watching and keep drinking. Okay, let's continue our deep dive into wild and weird grape varieties with Kenneth Volk and his Cabernet Pfeffer, a grape I haven't seen in a while, nor have tried more than once or twice in my life. Cabernet Pfeffer might be Cabernet Sauvignon crossing with a grape called Trousseau, but of the 12 acres that are planted in California, the DNA testing that they've done so far has found that it's another weird, rare grape variety from Bordeaux called Gros Verdot. Not Petite Verdot, but Gros Verdot, so a bigger grape, probably. But the name is tricky. Pfeffer in German can mean pepper, and people have noted that this has a peppery note to it typically. But it also might be related to the person who originally planted it in California, which was a arborist and viticulturist known as William Pfeffer. No relation to Michelle Pfeiffer, by the way. Different name, different spelling. But we plod on. So Kenneth Volk got a hold of some Cabernet Pfeffer from 2012 from San Benito County. Now, San Benito isn't in Paso Robles, where a lot of the grapes that Kenneth Volk works from. It's actually a little bit north of there, off of Monterey Bay, below the Santa Cruz Mountains, in a little valley there. And so most of the grapes that are grown there aren't made into wine there. They're typically shipped out to other producers, and this being no exception. And it's only 12 acres dedicated to this single grape type. So let's see if it lives up to its spicy name. So you might be able to see here, this is medium intensity ruby with definitely more garnet touch to it. This is 2012. The other wines had a bit better color retention. This I see is showing a little bit more age. Aromatically, I had to dig a bit, honestly. This is not as pronounced as the other wines we tried. This is definitely medium intensity. And dried red fruits like craisins or dried cranberries are noticeable here. I also get a bit of like artificial strawberry flavor, like those little hard-shelled strawberry candies that you can get. There's a slight like fresh new rubber, tire rubber, like bicycle rubber note to it as well, which isn't unpleasant. It's just kind of interesting. It's a little maybe a reflection of the alcohol. And yeah, I'd say there's a pepper note to it for sure. It's definitely one of those kind of like freshly cracked pink peppercorns. Dried rose petals, kind of a potpourri note almost as well. Pretty complex nose, but just not very intense. Kind of lackluster that way. The palate's dry. The acids are fairly medium plus. The tannins, I would say, are high. These are high tannins. And that's bolstered by the fact that the alcohol is pretty high too. It's 14.6%, and you get that heat and that drying quality from both the tannin and the alcohol basically sucking your mouth out of your face. It's pretty intense, which is regrettable because there's not much body there either. It's only, I'd say, medium minus in body. So all that acid and tannin and alcohol and structure is just kind of overwhelming the lack of body that's there. And the texture is fairly woody, fairly grainy. I'd say definitely not the most pleasant thing on its own. And in terms of flavors, they match much of what was going on in the nose. I definitely think the fruit's not as big, though, here on the palate. The palate I find is medium intensity flavors of that cracked peppercorn, more peppercorn in general overall, a slight smokiness as well. There's kind of an ashy, smoky thing going on here, almost volcanic. There's a bit of that alcoholic, like glycerol note, or something like that. It's kind of odd. Earthy, dried wood, forest floor, those sort of things are happening. And definitely dried fruit again, dried cranberries, leathery note. Overall, and they kind of just disappear. They're there and they're gone. It's, I think, again, the structures just kind of wipe the palate clean, so the flavors have no time to hang around for more than a moderate length. It's an interesting experiment, for sure, and a wine that definitely needs food. I would definitely pair this with anything garlicky. Lamb would be pretty happy here. Rich red meats. I would consider hard cheeses, olives, anything with a little olive tapenade might be kind of okay with it. Salty stuff, but it needs food. And there's not a lot there to be enjoyed on its own, and it's too structured otherwise. And definitely, I wouldn't age this. This is, if anything, passing peak. There's no fruit to hang out there. The tertiary characteristics, all that peppery spice and everything else, and that earth are just kind of overwhelming it. So, yeah, it's, I have to say, Kenneth Volk's 2012 Cabernet Pfeffer might have been better in its youth, but at this point, it's just not pleasant. It's not tired, it's just not there and lacks intensity, which I've read is at least common for Cabernet Pfeffer. It's just not Cabernet Sauvignon. It doesn't have that weight. It doesn't have that richness of fruit that you can get from Cab Sauv from California. So good quality, not great, but fine enough and well-balanced enough that it could handle some food nicely and shows off the variety characteristic pretty well. So, if you can find a bottle of Cabernet Pfeffer, give it a whirl, but definitely keep a side of maybe some prosciutto around or something to nibble on to take care of it, because it's pretty grippy stuff and, not a lot of fun, but interesting nonetheless. So there you go. Kenneth Volk's 2012 Cabernet Pfeffer. All right, let's continue with Kenneth Volk and try a grape type typically not grown in California, but one you might have heard of before and probably tried, and that is Barbera. Barbera, a grape grown thought to be native to the Piedmont region in northwestern Italy, in the foothills of the Alps above Milan, and usually playing second fiddle to Nebbiolo, which goes into Barolo or Barbaresco. Barbera has always been a great daily red with a bit of structure that can hold up to the foods made up there, including all the lovely sausages and things like that. And it has the structure and has the color and has the intensity to also age a little bit as well. And this is 2014 Barbera from San Benito County again, up in, working our way north towards San Francisco, below Santa Cruz Mountains, in the San Benito County AVA. And this is a single vineyard wine as well. This is the Soleto Ranch Vineyard Barbera, under the guiding hands of Kenneth Volk. So let's give it a try. Color intensity lives up to Barbera's name. It's definitely medium plus intensity ruby. Definitely has that nice extract to it. And lovely washy legs as well. Aromatically, age hasn't probably helped this wine much. It probably was much more interesting about 5 years ago. 2014, being almost 7 years prior to the present. You get a lot of dried herb here, a lot of sage, dill, dried dill, subdued notes of fruit, dark fruits, blackberry, boysenberry, that sort of thing. And a definite balsamic note, probably just because it's just had a bit too much time. The intensity of aromas also aren't that great. Barbera is never known for being exuberant or really powerful on the nose, and so this is medium minus intensity anyway, which is no surprise. On the palate, what you get is dryness. You get quite a lot of acidity. Surprisingly soft and quiet tannins here. Unlike the Aglianico we tried, and unlike the Cabernet Pfeffer we tried, the tannins are just kind of silky. Instead, you get a viscosity here, a glycerol note, glycerol kind of like slickness to this wine. It's very slick, very, yeah. The alcohol's high as well. It's pushing into the mid 14 points, 14 point something. And regrettably, the body's just not there. This is a medium-bodied wine. It really lacks a lot of depth and richness and fruit, really. And the flavors show the same thing. It's kind of watery, cranberry, blackberry notes, pomegranate juice. Lots of dried herb as well. Almost vegetal notes as well. Just not very pleasant. It's pretty watery, pretty slick, pretty bright, tart stuff that just doesn't have a lot going on. And the length is medium minus, I'd say. I'd like to say this wine is acceptable, but I can tell there's a bit better wine there that just would have shown better a few years ago. I'll give it a good. I wouldn't recommend it, though, typically. Kenneth Volk's Barbera, San Benito County, 2014. Should have been drunk a few years back. But honestly, even back then, it just would have been a nice, quaffable daily red, which is what one usually expects from Barbera. Barbera is meant just to be your pizza wine, your daily red that goes with nice red sauce pastas and that sort of thing, which this would be fine with. But I think it's now past it, regrettably. But good try. Interesting grape experiment out in California by Kenneth Volk. So find a younger bottle and enjoy. All right, let's try another interesting out there grape from Kenneth Volk. This is his 2014 Graciano from San Benito County, a single vineyard out there in San Benito County. Again, San Benito County, Northern California, just south of the Santa Cruz Mountains, a little bit inland, but certainly influenced by the Monterey Bay on the Pacific Ocean. So nice cooling influence there, but fairly dry climate inland as well. And Graciano probably likes that region because it's not too dissimilar there in Rioja, which grows about 90% of the grape in the world. Used as a blending grape with Tempranillo, Grenache, and other more familiar grape types to make classic Rioja. Now, Graciano on its own isn't usually bottled in Spain, and you'll rarely find it anywhere but maybe California and some vineyards in Australia that are more experimental than anything else. But here we have it from San Benito County, and this is the Ken Volk's 2014. So let's give it a shot. Now, it's fairly medium plus intensity ruby still. It's holding up its color quite nicely and shows a fair amount of viscosity, but nothing too waxy or clingy to the rim. And only starting to slightly show some of those garnet notes, but overall very still bright and ruby in color, and very clear. Now, Graciano usually as a blending grape is known for its intense aromatics. And here, it's okay. It's medium intensity, but you definitely get some really interesting complexity going on there. You get lovely crushed raspberries. If you're familiar with mulberries, there's a kind of purplish fruit going on there as well. It's very pretty. Violet notes, very purpley violet notes as well. Dried violets. I definitely get a little bit of tobacco ash here, possibly from oak aging, clove, sort of twingy orange peel, slight balsamic note, as well as dried mint. This grape is often used to add both color to Tempranillo as well as some of those more punchy aromatics. On the palate, it's dry. The acidity is medium plus, fairly mouth-watering stuff. The tannins are there. Graciano is known for having a bit more tannin than this. I'd say they're moderate tannins, fairly grainy in texture, but fine, pleasant enough. Alcohol is also moderate. It's around 13.6% by volume, and the body isn't very big. I was expecting more of a big powerhouse of a wine that would be used to blend with, but instead we got more of a medium body, and I think that's in part, again, due to what Ken Volk does in his winemaking, which is well-retained acidity. And this acidity just helps to kind of freshen it up and keep it not as heavy and ponderous that it would otherwise be. So yeah, medium body, pretty well balanced overall. Grainy texture, but pretty pleasant overall. Slight slickness, slight viscosity, but you know, kind of like a rougher carpet almost. Flavors come off very twangy. Again, that bright acidity that Ken Volk has. Almost kind of like a grapefruit-like twang or orange peel acidity. And there's lots of mocha powder here. We definitely get a lot of chocolate on the palate, as well as on the nose. I forgot to mention there's a kind of mocha quality to it. And you get that kind of raspberry note to it. But it's more like fruit leather. You know, kind of that candy, that fruit leather that's got that texture, even has the seeds in it still. But there's enough plumpness, enough fruit there for a wine this old that makes it pretty pleasant. And you get a little bit more of those earth tones and those herbs as well. That bit of ash is there, especially on the finish. That carries for a medium plus length. This is very good quality wine. It's got enough complexity of aromas, enough retained fruit, and enough of the kind of depth and length and balance in structures to make it kind of worthwhile. I would say this definitely could benefit from some protein. Chorizo would be pretty awesome with this. Sausage dishes, maybe a paella, meat-based one would be pretty cool. Aged cheeses would be nice as well. So there you have it. A very good Graciano, if you can find it, from Kenneth Volk from 2014 in San Benito County, California. Bright, refreshing, well-colored, but not overly tannic at this point. I think partly because of its age. You know, 2014, going on 7 years now, give or take, has allowed the tannin to kind of mellow out a bit. And so it's in a very good place right now. I wouldn't probably age this more than a couple more years, because all you'll have left is acid and dust, and that beautiful bright fruit that's there, that beautiful ruby color, would have gone by then. But holding up pretty well. Quite impressed. So very good quality, and, you know, worth drinking now. And now for a grape you might have actually heard of. Unlike Aglianico, Graciano, and some of those more obscure things, Kenneth Volk, yes, he makes a Petite Syrah. This Petite Syrah comes out of Paso Robles from the French Camp Vineyards. It's a plural, so maybe there are multiple vineyards, but either way, French Camp Vineyards are famed for producing some pretty spectacular Petite Syrah. And yeah, that's a grape to grow out there in that beautiful warm climate of Paso Robles, for sure. It definitely loves the heat. And so 2014 vintage here, so let's see how this holds up. I've been tasting this, actually left it open and tasted it over the last few days to watch how it would evolve, and it's got some staying power, to say the least. It doesn't really fade. As you can see, it's pure ink. This is deep, deep, deep purple. Ruby highlights, that sort of thing. Quite leggy, quite a lot of leftover glycerol from the alcohol evaporation on the sides of the glass. And aromatically, yeah, it's medium plus intensity and quite powerful stuff. This is pretty heady. You get, once you can get past the alcohol that's there, you definitely get like this really like almost petrol-like quality from the alcohol. There's some beautiful, beautiful like cherry syrup, black cherry syrup, blueberry syrup almost, like really rich extracted stuff. And this sees open top fermentation as well. A fair amount of whole cluster going on too, which allows all that native yeast to kind of just pulse through and process the grapes and extract sugars. But yeah, lots of cool spices here too. Cracked peppercorn, which we got on some of the other wines as well. A little bit of orange peel, dried orange peel. Again, there's an acid there, for sure, a citric component. But that peppercorn, that almost like if you take a pan and fry the peppercorn, it's got that like aromatic going on. And vanilla, dried vanilla bean. On the palate, somehow it's dry. Even though this wine is technically 15.9% alcohol, as far as I can tell, it seems like they managed to ferment it all the way to dryness before those yeasts completely collapsed and left some sugar over. So there's no sugar left here at all. It's bone dry. There's acid there too. It's quite nice. It's definitely like a medium acidity. Just enough to make you want to drink a bit more, and just enough to kind of brighten up and kind of zip up that alcohol. The tannins are pretty pleasant. They're medium intensity tannins, but they're ripe, they're round, they're plush, like a really, really velour carpet almost. Yeah, body is medium plus as well. There's a good chunk of weight there, lots of fruit there. And the alcohol, the 15.9%, definitely contributes to that. But it's just what Petite Syrah is from a hot climate. You know, it's got that heat, it's got that weight, it's got that structure, but it's actually pretty well brightened by the acidity as well that's there. And the texture is lovely. It's got this lovely kind of graininess to it. The richness of those tannins. You can almost put your fingers through it, like rubbing or scraping along a carpet. A really nice, rich carpet. Flavor intensity is medium plus as well. You get lots of nice, punchy black cherry, that twangy tartness that you get with cherries as well. Yeah, it's really, really cool. And a lot of those spice notes, you get tobacco, vanilla. There's some nice earthiness almost showing up here, like dried porcini mushrooms going on, which makes it kind of cool. The peppercorns are definitely there. It's spiced. This is kicking stuff for sure. Very, very pouncy. Yeah, I think there's medium plus length as well. I mean, this is very good, solid stuff. Yeah, Kenneth Volk's 2014 Petite Syrah from the French Camp Vineyards is holding up really well, considering I've been tasting this over the last couple of days. It's still showing as fresh as it did a few days ago. The tertiary notes, all that earth and that spice, is definitely starting to come more to the fore, but there's ample fruit there to hang out for another 5 years or more. So it's certainly peaking, and I would drink it now because it's in a really happy place. The tannins are totally resolved, very smooth, very ripe, very round. And it's going to get, I think, more dusty in character and texture over time. So drink now. It's quite happy, but be warned. This is definitely a wine to sip and take your time with and eat food with, because 15.9% alcohol will catch up quickly. I mean, we're talking Banule territory here. It's quite powerful stuff. But yeah, very good quality. And again, Ken Volk, even though he makes elegant, beautiful, light on its feet Pinot Noirs and even really elegant, Barberas and Gracianos, even his Petite Syrah's got some poise to it, but it's been to the gym and it's done the weights for sure. And it shows. It's quite a solid thing. So if you can find it, drink it. It's pretty awesome.